From the Gluck Gluck 9000, I can't believe I just said that out loud, to interviewing Vice President Kamala Harris, Alex Cooper has had a wild ride of success over the last 6 years. We're going to dive into our thoughts on the latest Hulu docuseries, Call Her Alex. I'm Mallory Hagan.
And I'm Maggie Burnett. This is Pretty Furious.
Maggie, I can't believe you made me say Gluck Gluck 9000.
I'm so sorry. I was like, Mallory, go ahead and read this week's intro.
And I did, famously without reading it first. Oh, I love that.
Good times.
Good times indeed. Man, we both had an opportunity to kind of kick back and relax this past week, and we were like, we should talk about this docuseries. Series is a strong word. These 2 episodes, this documentary split in 2.
Literally, this prolonged 1 episode.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I have some
thoughts and feelings.
But first, we can't be pretty furious without being pretty first. What do you have this week?
So I just made an Instagram story about this. And also, really quick, before we get into the weeds too far, I do want to thank, is it our friend Tala? Is that her name? Tala, I just want to say, hopefully today you can't hear me breathing anymore. For whatever reason, you guys, my mic, the last couple of episodes was turned up all the way on the volume, on the input. So when you have it turned up super high, it obviously picks up every little noise ever. And we didn't really understand what was going on. I was like, why can people hear my nose whistling all of a sudden? And so, yeah, thank you so much to Tala for informing us that I was breathing really heavily during. And I do just want to say, I do be breathing. I be I'm just constantly gasping for air.
I do that too. That has been a major pregnancy symptom, but I also just mute. I think people would rather hear my mouse click when I click mute on our Riverside backend
for sure.
Than hear me
heaving into the mic. Yeah. So anyway, Tala, thank you so much for that. My product this week.
We were texting and she was like, just some constructive criticism. And I was like, girl, I know, we can hear it.
And I couldn't figure it out. I was like, why all of a sudden can you just hear me
whistling,
Darth Vadering in the background? I just was, so confused by that. Anyway, my product this week is a very good, it goes well in conjunction with my headline that I brought. So this is the Bioma, I think that's how you say it. It's the Ultralight Face Fluid SPF 50.
Ooh.
This is my current favorite SPF. It is, I think, $16 at Target. This is, in my opinion, what everybody loves about Korean sunscreen and Korean skincare. This is that. So, super affordable price point. I love Bioma.
Is it a mineral? It's okay.
That's
if
a
not,
good
I was
question.
just
It just says barrier boosting sunscreen. So I'm not really sure. I don't think so. But yeah, I'm obsessed with this. It's lovely. It sits really nicely under makeup too. It doesn't pill. So I've been wearing it for the last 10 days nonstop. So it's great.
You know, it's funny that you say that. I think that the last time we were chatting about my face breakout situation, I had put on sunscreen that week. And normally I don't wear a different SPF. I just put on my normal moisturizing routine. And I'm wondering if a piece of it was that my skin did not like whatever that sunscreen was that I was wearing. But anyway.
Yeah.
I am actually headed off to the beach. So maybe I'll pick some up and try it and see if my skin agrees with that one.
Yeah, give it a go.
Give it a go. Speaking of skin, mine's getting older. We've talked about this. And so my product is actually the Tarte Creaseless Concealer. A lot of people love Shape Tape, but I think if you're maturing even just a little bit, under the eyes, this stuff is a dream trick. I don't have any on today. I have on minimal makeup. Put it on your skin first, let it warm up, and then use a brush to dab it in, don't brush it in, and then let it sit for a little while before you set it with powder, and it will work like a dream. I am not going to waste the product. I just put it on my hands. Let's just brighten these bad boy bags up. Yeah, I don't know if there's any hope. Yeah, it's one of my favorites. And I think I actually found it through, I am going to forget her name now. She is a lawyer slash makeup artist on TikTok. Blonde Southern woman. I cannot think of her name for the life of me right now.
Does she do all of the, is she an immigration attorney?
No, not her, but
Oh,
like
okay.
her too.
I love her. Yeah, she's great.
Anyway, if I think of it, I'll make sure I give her a shout because that's who put me onto this. When she was like, if you're even just a little bit older, you want this so it doesn't move and it doesn't crease under your eyelids. So anyway.
You did the Katie Jane Hughes trick for Katie Jane Hughes is one of my favorite makeup artists on TikTok, and she's a lovely British woman. And she gives a ton of tips on like how to make makeup go further, like stretch it further. And she does a ton of content on like mature skin and things like that. And that's one of her favorite tips is to like put the concealer on the back of your hand, stipple it on with a brush because you use way less product.
Absolutely. So, and you do. I mean, I just did a little twist, and obviously that's less than I would have put on if I was doing a full beat, but still love it. And for what it's worth, I bought this on like April of 2024. And
it lasts forever.
Still going. Yeah. Granted, I don't wear a full face of makeup every day, but I have had this. I bought this for my wedding, and I haven't had to buy another one. So we're like 15 months in or something. Anywho, well, now moving into the depressing piece of Pretty Furious, and that is what headlines are making us pretty furious this week.
I am really excited to share this one. Like I said, it kind of goes in tandem with my product. And so, Mallory, I don't know if you knew that this was happening, but the Turning Point USA Women's Conference was held last week. And this headline is from The Cut, and it says, more babies and beef tallow, less blue hair and birth control. 72 hours with America's most ambitious young conservative women. So this is an article from E.J. Dixon, who is a senior writer at The Cut. And this article perfectly highlights kind of the entire, she does an amazing job of just like highlighting the environment that she's in at this conference. And basically,
which
it's
I can only imagine to be hellish.
Oh, I mean, like, here's my thing. I feel so strongly that, like, investigative journalism, which this is, let's be clear, I'm not going to put this in, like, investigative journalism. It's cultural. But it's almost like I do feel, to an extent, she maybe had to, like, be a little undercover-ish. If I were expected to, like, attend a conference like this as somebody, and I wasn't allowed to basically go out and say overtly like my political beliefs. And that's not to say that this person who wrote this article wasn't allowed to do that, but I'm just speculating. I would light myself on fire. Like there is absolutely
no way
Maggie?
that I participating in the Miss America organization for multiple years in a row is basically the same thing.
It truly is.
I mean, I competed in Alabama. What do you mean?
I actually competed in Alabama. I don't know if I've ever told you that before, but I competed for Miss University of Alabama. I was first runner up.
Well,
but yeah, so that's my headline.
We have some experience with what that must feel like. It wasn't until I moved to New York where I was like, oh, these people are relatively normal. Okay.
Yeah, there were some buttons at this conference that said things like dump your socialist boyfriend. My favorite season is the fall of feminism. And,
see, but here's the thing though. They're probably like 90% of them are from red states where they are the recipients of socialism in every capacity.
100%.
Dump your socialist boyfriend. Yeah, dump the guy who's getting government assistance. That'd be great. Thank you.
You dump California.
What?
Like, literally what? I just don't. Yeah, that is my personal hell. Alex Clark being on stage being like, it's cool to be a conservative. I'm like, you're wearing a sock bun.
And a tweed suit.
And tweed.
Which, like, no hate to tweed. I own a tweed jacket.
I love a tweed moment, but
I just said I own a tweed jacket. Why can't I talk anymore?
We're going to keep a running tally of how many times Mallory develops a lisp on her episode.
Honest to God, I was thinking about it the other day. I was like, you wouldn't know that my entire job as Miss America, and for years beyond, was to speak.
Was to talk.
I was literally a news anchor. What are we doing? Now I can't say the most basic words. My mouth is getting lazy. I need to how now, brown cow. Oh, man.
What's your headline? Fuck.
My headline is actually one that really grinds my gears, given that it is Pride Month. We have really not acknowledged that so far. It's kind of interesting when we record once a week. It's sort of like, I think the headline that literally is just like hitting us in the face is the thing that we tend to. And I was explaining, Tala, who you mentioned earlier, was asking why we haven't really dove into, I guess, like Israel, Palestine, Gaza, and now Iran. And I think the truth of the matter is just that when the two of us sit down, it's like, what has happened in the last 48 hours, maybe.
Yeah.
And if I'm being even more honest, the amount of time and prep that we put into this podcast is what we can give it for right now, given that it's something that we do in our own time and for free. And so we really should talk about that at some point. But the reason I was saying that is we haven't talked about Pride because I think so many other things have been really slapping us in the face with the parade and the, ICE and all of that kind of stuff. But it is Pride Month, and it just came out yesterday. Today's June 19th that we're recording, that the Trump administration is to shut down the LGBTQ youth suicide hotline. That headline that I'm reading is from NBC News, but it has been everywhere, and it's notably being shut down on John Lewis's birthday on July 17th.
Cool.
And they're couching it as like people can still get help. There's still a suicide hotline, but the particular press 3 option that was for the LGBTQ community was one that sent them to someone who was trained to interact with and handle the LGBTQ community's mental health crises and all that kind of stuff. So this just makes me furious because the attack on, let's be honest, solely the trans community, I think is really driving this decision. And, people will die because of this. People will die because somebody on the other end of the line, even though they might be super well-meaning, really might not have the level of understanding necessary to pull someone back from a crisis like that. So
yeah, definitely.
That's what's making me pretty furious.
Removing the T as well, I believe, from the
it says
LGBTQ. Yeah, or something. And so again, just another, like, I'm not going to call it subtle, but they might think it's a subtle way of this erasure of trans people. And yeah, that is insanely disappointing, but it's also just inhumane.
Yeah.
All of this is inhumane. So yeah.
So we would like to have an interesting segue from the erasure of the trans community and a suicide hotline to Alex Cooper, but there's not one. So this episode is brought to you by us wanting to watch something together and talk about it on our podcast.
Yes.
So with the Alex Cooper documentary coming out, that's precisely what we did. And Maggie, just like top line, when you finished the 2-part series, what did you think?
So many thoughts and feelings. Okay, well, first of all, I thought that it was pretty surface level, right? Like I didn't feel like I gained a ton of knowledge about Alex Cooper that I didn't already know before, or Call Her Daddy and like the inception of the show. I started listening to Call Her Daddy in like basically when it first came out. I remember the first, kind of episodes with Alex and Sophia, and have followed it since. I mean, up until now. I'm not like an avid listener or enormous fan, but I keep my finger on the pulse and, listen to episodes here and there. So yeah, I feel like there was much more to be said as it relates to just the evolution of the show, more broadly speaking. Which again, I mean, I think this docuseries was focused more on her as a person, which was great. But again, I felt like it was a little bit surface level. Yeah, that's kind of my initial initial feelings and thoughts. What about you?
Definitely same thing. I didn't realize that the through line was her live show, and it felt kind of, in the way that we might see Beyonce putting on a show or J-Lo or whatever, except we didn't really get a good glimpse at either thing, right? We didn't get a good glimpse at the true intricacies of going from being a behind the mic, behind the camera person to the real grind that it takes to do something on stage. Which, by the way, the scenes that we saw of her on stage, they were great. It looked like her shows were a lot of fun, and looked like people had a great time. And I think her warmth really transcended into, you know, sometimes people are like TikTok stars or YouTube stars and then they get in front of actual people and they don't know how to operate.
Yeah.
So I think Alex Cooper is, what it showed me is that her humility and her grace and like her forward thinking, it showed me all of those things. And it was one of those moments, you know, how people say like Kelly Clarkson, we made the right person famous.
Yeah.
I kind of felt that way about Alex. Granted, I know that she's an executive producer. We saw what she wanted us to see, but I did kind of get that. Like, if there's somebody who is going to have this crazy ascension from making $70,000 to $170 million in 6 years, she was kind of the right person to do that. I appreciate
For sure.
I appreciate the background and her family support and showing like two waspy Northeastern parents being like, yeah, my daughter's talking about dicks. It's totally fine. You know, like,
For sure.
So I appreciated a lot of it. I did feel a little left in the dark still about the process of how they interview people or how much they really use the psychology that they all understand to get their guests to talk. And I don't know.
Yeah.
I felt like it was surface level as well. And
Yeah.
the general feeling was like, oh, that was nice, I guess. But I didn't feel like I really learned that much. And that's coming from someone who I do listen to. I would say I listen to 3 out of 5 episodes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you're like you definitely listen a lot.
Yeah, I listen and appreciate the variety of content that gets discussed. But I didn't feel like I learned anything in the 2 hours of watching that I didn't already know.
How do you feel about her interviewing skills?
I actually really appreciate the way she oscillates between really dumb, silly. I mean, her interviews with Chelsea Handler have me in stitches, right? They just talk about stupid shit and smoking weed and like all the pills that they've done. And not that I'm condoning that, although I don't not, question mark.
Also do what you want.
Also have a great time. I think that's really fun. And I also appreciate that she seems to have the ability to sort of help people let their guard down in a way that allows them to be a little bit more vulnerable or potentially share something that maybe we wouldn't have learned from them otherwise. So my number one complaint, and you know this about me, I have turned off episodes for her likes. The 4 likes in a sentence will make me turn it off.
Yeah,
Because
totally.
I can't get through the thought pattern because it's just too much. So that's my only, there's still a little Valley Girl, a little like, a little
For sure.
that kind of thing that sometimes I feel diminishes the content or the message because it took us too long to get there.
Yeah, totally. It's interesting that, I mean, I think you have a better grasp on the content and the way in which she interviews more than I do because you just, by the frequency at which you listen. I will say, as somebody who has sort of followed the journey from Jump to now and sort of watched this evolution happen, obviously she's going from talking about sex, the Gluck Gluck 9000, all of these like really, you know, what were sort of quote unquote taboo topics at the time.
Well, let's be honest,
To-
some of that stuff is still it's a lot.
Yeah, and still are, for sure. I mean, you aren't going to get me giving a, you know, blowjob tutorial on this podcast.
Correct.
Like, there's just no way. And also, I think that transition of like, you know, this really kind of crass content, sort of, to now interviewing the Vice President of the United States, I feel a little bit, and maybe this is because, again, I don't listen at the frequency at which you do, but like, or a really big fan does, but I do sort of feel that there was like maybe a little bit lost in the shuffle along the way of like, how did we get here, right? Like, what are we trying to be now? Are we trying to be somebody who is a quote serious, relatively speaking, serious and respected journalist who is interviewing really important and prominent people about their lives and about what they have to offer to the world? Or are we trying to still be kind of the 2019 Alex Cooper? And if it's, I'm getting the impression from both this docuseries and from the podcast generally that it's both, but I think I'm getting a little bit lost in sort of the, like, just as it pertains to her interviewing skills and the way in which she constructs episodes, I'm a little bit lost in the shuffle, like sort of like, where are we where are we going with this, you know, type of thing. So yeah, it's interesting. And I mean, honestly, let's be real, like, you know, podcasting, it's not that deep. But also, I do feel like she is somebody who, she is the most renowned female podcaster in the world. She is, you know, at the caliber that Joe Rogan is at. And
Well, I
feel
wouldn't
like that's
call
sort
him
of,
renowned.
I mean, well,
but yeah.
let's not say caliber, but popularity. I should
Audience
say.
size.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, rises to the charts in the same way that the Joe Rogan show does. But I think, like, yeah, I guess with that comes a certain responsibility, right? Of like, your skills have to also evolve. And I think they have to a degree, but I want to see more of that evolution. And I want to see more of like, what are we doing to sort of maybe take a stance in that more journalistic approach and more like, you know, serious approach, which I think she is trying to do,
Yeah.
you know, from my kind of viewpoint, but I could be totally off base.
I definitely think that we could have learned more about that evolution in the series itself. But I also, I mean, I've been on the other side of many produced television shows, reality docuseries. Shout out to Secrets of Miss America on Hulu if you want to learn more. I've been behind the scenes, and I understand also how you might shoot for only 3 or 4 days and you've got 2 hours worth of docuseries content. Granted, I don't think that was the case with them because we did see so much of their lead up to the live show, but still the point remains it was probably a set of producers and then a couple of cameras. I'm talking 2, maybe 3 cameras. And whatever they got, and they built something out of that kind of thing. So I do wonder if that was part of it. I think what I would have really enjoyed was actually more of, we learned about her best friend who's been with her since they were young. And her best friend has a degree in psychology and helps her with the production of Call Her Daddy, helps her develop their questions and pull together the content that they need to conduct an interview. And I honestly would have, I think, appreciated that so much more than the storyline of her college sexual harassment case. And not because I don't think that that's an important thing to discuss.
Totally.
And I especially think her case, the college sexual harassment case that was discussed it was sexual harassment, absolutely 100%. I'm not going to deny that piece of it. But I think it was important for the masses to see that sexual harassment doesn't have to be physical. And that she was experiencing something that was isolating, that was scary, that made her feel threatened, like all of those things. And I think that message is definitely one that particularly her audience needs to see and understand. Like somebody doesn't have to put their hands on you or grope you or do something physical or aggressive to you in order for this to be a problem. That storyline in her 2-hour series with everything else just kind of felt like
it was interesting.
It just didn't feel congruent with the rest of what we were learning. It kind of felt like we're going to use this to tell this piece of my story.
Yeah.
But without learning all the other things about your life, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how to describe it. It just kind of felt like the sexual harassment case was here and everything else was over here. And I really would have preferred to learn about the sexual harassment situation somewhere separately, or maybe in an episode separately or something like that from her than the business side of Call Her Daddy, I feel.
Yeah. Or even tie it in a little bit more with, like, this was something I kept thinking about while at the end of watching this series was like, how did this sexual harassment case impact how she ended up viewing sex, her body, trusting women, you know, all of these different things, which, like, especially the trusting women piece, like, she has a former podcast, you know, co-host who we know there to be a certain amount of drama associated with that falling out.
Which also wasn't touched on.
At all. Yeah.
No,
like,
it was basically just like she didn't want to do this and I did, so.
And I thought to myself, I was like, wait a minute. I thought it was way more like,
it was.
in depth than that.
Well,
yeah.
which could show one of two things. It could show that she was like, this is not the moment to get into that. That's not why we're doing this.
Yeah.
Or, I mean, maybe they signed an NDA, or maybe they...
And legally,
maybe legally she can't. But, yeah, it was very much just like, we loved working together, and then we didn't. And I went on to make millions of dollars, and she opted out.
Yeah, exactly. It was so bizarre. And then, like, she also has a relatively like, kind of public falling out with Alex Earl. So all of these pieces of like, I want to know how that impacted your relationship to other women, and like how you are speaking to a enormous audience of women after having all of this stuff happen with other women that has been traumatic, that has, felt really invasive. I'm sure has,
Felt
just
betrayed.
damaged her trust in other people. So that was another thing where I was like, and especially as it relates to sex more generally, like I was sort of like, I know what it took for me to feel comfortable with my sexuality and with, intimacy and all of those things after, a sexual assault incident and, things like that. I want to know about that piece of it. It's sort of like, that's where I feel like she maybe could have tied these pieces together a little bit more versus like,
that's a great point.
Here's this story and here's this story, and we're just going to like mush them together,
Yeah, that's a great point. I also think, even though she has never outright said that she voted for or supported Kamala, I think it would be really interesting to hear how her experiences in business, how her experiences in college, how her experiences with sex and society, all of those things inform her decision making when it comes to what she chooses to do or support politically. I do think you were talking about her becoming or like easing more into like journalistic podcasting versus just gossip podcasting. And her episode where she went to the abortion clinic and stood outside and talked to people, you could tell these are things she has thought about and definitely has conversed about in her private life. But I think that was one of the first real toe dips into, this is an extremely hot button topical conversation across our country. And she was trying to expose her audience to perhaps a different perspective without giving her own too much. And so I appreciated that. I think it's interesting. I didn't even consider how she was shaped by those experiences when it comes to business and work and relationships. And agreed. I mean, we've talked about this a little bit, but between childhood sexual trauma and adult sexual trauma, figuring out how to navigate. I was talking to my therapist about this yesterday, how to navigate the societal expectations of what you're supposed to be and the wave of feminism that like doing these things is bad and wrong and dirty and shameful, but also we're pulling in the direction of, but you are allowed to have sexual agency and, just living in the Venn diagram of that is a lot.
Yeah,
so I think her
absolutely.
talking about that a little bit more would have been potentially more helpful. Although I think she does in the podcast itself.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we haven't explicitly talked about this a ton on an episode or anything, but you and I both have experiences with childhood sexual abuse with women. When you have an experience like that happens with somebody of your same gender, and then you go on to do something really competitive with other women, college soccer, Miss America, whatever it is, where your competition is your, again, same gender, that I think has a really interesting, complex narrative associated with it that, I would love to hear her talk about that and about how, I know that has certainly a massive part of my own undoing and unbecoming and rebecoming as a person has been to change the way I think about other women and to not view women as my competition, my, counterparts I have to constantly size myself up against, and to not view them as also dangerous, and everybody has their own time in which they want to, share that information, if ever, with the masses. And of course, her platform is huge. So, it's not up to us to decide, if she should share any of that or not. But I think that maybe giving this information about her sexual harassment case in college maybe could be an opening for her to explore that a little bit more, because I would be so interested to know how that has impacted her view of other women.
That's so interesting. I have never thought about that. I've
Really?
never thought about how the trauma that I experienced being with a person of the same gender might impact how I now interact with women. Although I feel very strongly that it was really moving out of the South that took me out of that mindset. I really felt compared to and less than and in competition with, competing for male attention with when I was younger here in the South.
Yeah.
But when I moved to New York and became a part of like the Miss New York world of women who were all extremely independent, go-getters, like out in their field doing their thing, it was just a shift in mindset. And I'll never forget, I mean, Claire, who is now my very best friend, Claire was a person who everyone told us we would hate each other. Like, we had never even met each other. And they're like, oh my God, you're going to hate that Claire girl. You're going to hate her. She's so competitive. And like, and then we met and I was like, shh, we're a lot alike. What do you mean?
Yeah.
And in fact, I actually really like her a lot. Because she's very like direct and to the point and no nonsense and like get it done. So that's interesting. I have not really ever considered where that level of competition and friction with other women started and where it kind of, I shouldn't say it ended, but I definitely think that era of my life, so I was like 21, 22, meeting the women in New York that I became close with was the shift for me. We were not in competition with each other. I was in competition with myself. They just happened to be on the same stage. Like, that's kind of how I viewed things. Yeah, I think that's so interesting. I was thinking the very first episode I ever listened to of Call Her Daddy was actually with Alex and Miley Cyrus. She was in Miley Cyrus's house. And I remember I was like, I keep seeing people talk about this Call Her Daddy. Like, let me listen to it. And it was her and Miley. And they did. They talked about some things that were sexual. But I also remember thinking, I can't believe this girl's sitting in Miley Cyrus's house. Like this relatively unknown podcasting girl, which to me, she was unknown. I don't even remember what year that was, but it couldn't have been that long ago.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
I just remember thinking to myself, she's getting Miley Cyrus like sit on her couch and open up about her life. Not that Miley Cyrus has ever been an especially closed off person, but
for sure.
But I just remember thinking there was something to that.
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
Like celebrities don't just let you in their house.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I think all of this too is a really interesting kind of look into like how Alex Cooper plays her own role in the conversation of feminism and like modern feminism and what that looks like. And I think there are plenty of people who will argue, you know, because she is a very beautiful, like objectively attractive white woman, that, you know, that she has not made her own contributions to sort of the feminist movement. And to that, I would argue, like, I think she has very much so in her own specific ways. I have to stop you there because there is also, you know, we always say that there are certain people in certain spaces that open doors faster. Exactly.
I'm thinking about this relative to like the LGBTQ community. I sit on a board and there have been people who are like, why are you even on the board? You're an ally. You're not a part of the community. And then there are other people who are very much like, we have to have people who look and operate a certain way so that we can reach a certain other group of people. And I definitely think that same thing could apply. And I hesitate to say that because I don't want it to sound like white savior. But I definitely think,
for sure,
I definitely think when you've got someone who looks like Alex Cooper talking about blowjobs and sex, it's more palatable to the masses than potentially even what you look like. Like, I don't know.
100%.
But you know, like
100%.
there are just certain ways that information can be packaged where it reaches people differently and faster and potentially with less friction. And then the conversation can break open and more people can have it. And I think it's naive for people to think otherwise and not just about feminism, but about anything. You know,
totally.
If you're trying to reach a certain group of people, a certain audience, you got to think about who's delivering the message and how they're delivering it. And that goes for any subject matter.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, great point earlier with the abortion conversation and her going to that clinic. And she had said in this docuseries that she doesn't often bring politics into the picture, or hadn't for, you know, many years. And now she is, you know, she interviewed the vice president, you know, like she interviewed a female candidate for president. Like that's massive. That is huge for her audience to hear how, Kamala Harris was planning to make impacts for women. Like all of this is important to a broader conversation about like how can we get, I think specifically Gen Z, involved in the conversation about feminism, because it is important. These
slipping
people
away.
Yeah, these are people who are attending the fucking Turning Point USA Women's Conference, like listening to Alex Clark get on stage talking about like it's cool to be conservative. And it's like y'all are,
It's cool to not take your birth control and wind up pregnant and stuck in an unhappy marriage.
And be a trad wife with no out and like all of the, it's just like, dude,
Speaking of
that's
trad
a great
wives,
point.
Short plug, we are interviewing. Do you want to share it? You're super excited.
We're interviewing Tia Levings in early July, and I'm gonna shit my pants, you guys. So A Well-Trained Wife is one of my top books that I've read in the last probably 5 years. It is an exceptional book. It is a difficult read, absolutely, but it is so good. Mallory, I can't wait for you to read it. That's my beach read. It's incredible. I couldn't put it down. I think I read it faster than like any other book I've read in the last calendar year, if not longer. But yeah, we're interviewing Tia and I can't wait. I'm gonna lose my mind. Yeah. My head's gonna spin around. So but yeah.
So just this idea that Gen Z is slipping to the right, really taking in this mass messaging of trad wives and all of that. So important to have somebody offering different perspectives like Alex Cooper is.
Yeah, definitely. I'm curious to know your thoughts on how like Alex Cooper and Call Her Daddy, I think just from the beginning, like if it can really be meaningfully feminist when coming from a show that was so entrenched in how to please men. Like I think that is a big thing that people don't realize a lot, is that like those early days of Call Her Daddy, when they're giving a ton of sex advice, like so much of that is from a heteronormative view. So it's talking about how as a woman can you please a man, or how can you get a man to do XYZ thing to you. And while I think there's certain feminist like undertones obviously housed within that, I'm curious how you think about that from like the lens of this evolution and like how we've seen modern feminism evolve, and like how the male gaze has played such a role in all of this.
Well, I think the first thing to note is that Call Her Daddy was under the umbrella of Barstool Sports, right? So I mean,
Dave Portnoy.
Let's be honest. A huge MAGA maniac man who's amassed a fortune on being crass and horrendous and locker room talk. And that kind of shit is what allowed someone like Donald Trump to permeate the media and society, and for people to go, well, that's just what guys do.
And become president.
Sorry. Yeah. So Dave Portnoy can fuck all the way off.
Yeah.
But
let's be clear.
I do think that it was a smart business move on his part, and it allowed them to reach a new audience, which as demonstrated, they did. But I also think, we would be silly to not acknowledge that we were also dumb and young and crass and willing to potentially do a lot of things when we were 19, 20 years old. I can't remember the exact age that Alex moved to New York City, but I was 19 when I moved.
I think she was like 23, right out of college.
If there's anywhere on this planet to spend your early 20s and have a blast, it's New York City.
Best.
I had a great time. I learned a lot. I did a lot of things I'm super proud of. I did a lot of things I'm not so proud of. But I think for where she was right then, sharing life as a single young person in New York City, that made sense.
Yeah.
And I am no longer at 36 the person I was when I moved to New York, or even when I left New York at 27. So much has changed and evolved in my life. And what I used to think was funny and fun and cute and cool and potentially excusable, I don't anymore. And I would imagine that Alex, it doesn't seem like she looks back on any of those episodes, or she didn't express that, and she doesn't have like a cringe moment.
Yeah, for sure.
But I would imagine if it was just the two of us sitting in her living room, she would say, I understand that the Gluck Gluck got me from point A to point B, but like, maybe I wouldn't have. I don't know.
Yeah,
So
totally.
I think it speaks more to just humanity and like being a woman and coming out of college and what life looks like then and how you evolve both as a human and a business person from point A to point
totally.
B. When they said that their 3-year deal was $70,000, I about threw up. I was like, what?
I
Barstool
know. I
Sports
could
was
not
a
believe that.
multi-million dollar company even then.
Yeah,
And
I could not believe
I
that.
could not believe and $70,000 will get you jack shit in New York.
In New
Yeah,
York, yeah,
and
that's literally like
I mean, granted,
you're at poverty line.
that's what I was making, but
Yeah.
but that's why I know that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it speaks more to just how we as people and especially as women evolve.
Yeah,
I'm not who I was when I
100%.
was 23 either, and I wouldn't expect her to
Yeah.
be, especially with the exposure to people and money that she's had.
Yeah, for sure. Speaking of money,
Speaking of money,
okay, so she first gets this like $60 million deal with Spotify.
which is,
And
by
then
the
she
way,
goes on
a fuck ton of money.
an absolute fucking shitload of money. So she gets a $60 million deal.
$60 million to
Million dollars.
interview people who are fun and interesting with your best friend as
And-
your producer. What?
That's the dream. That's the dream. It's the dream. I mean, that's literally
Maggie, what are we
we're trying
doing?
to do. What we need to talk about, Mallory, is blowjobs. No, I'm just kidding. But
Our husbands are like, what?
Ty's like, you're not giving that information away for free. No, I'm just kidding. But basically, like, this $60 million deal happens, and then a few years later, she signs with SiriusXM for 120 million. And then she begins the Unwell Network. She starts bringing on Gen Z voices. That's like kind of the goal once she signs the SiriusXM deal.
Which
to
I
bring on
love.
Gen Z
She's
voices.
pulling
Love
down,
that.
putting down the ladder and pulling people up it. I like that.
Love that. Love that. That's a total vibe that is exactly what we want to see women in business doing. So love all of that. I don't know as to though I understood the deal she had. So I knew about the SiriusXM deal because that was like what, last year maybe ish. And
Yeah, it was really, they were back to back very fast.
yeah, so that was all over the place, the SiriusXM deal. I don't know that I even really understood the Spotify deal or like what came out of that Spotify deal. $60 million, it like 110 mil. I just can't believe the sheer amount of money that this woman has made.
She's making more money than your favorite professional athletes.
100%. And then, and this is in, let's be clear, this is in a 6 to 7 year time frame.
Yeah.
Alex Cooper is the same age as me.
She went
is
from living
like
with,
a year older than me.
with two other roommates with no furniture in a New York City apartment to making $170 million or $170 million deal basically in 6 years.
I cannot wrap my brain around it. Like I am just, that amount of money is crazy to me. But I mean, listen, I think she deserves to, get her bag. Like, listen, she's done a lot for women in the podcasting space, in the media space, more broadly speaking. And so, yeah, I think that's just incredible. And holy fuck, how do we, let us know your tips and tricks on how we should, how we get there. Thank you so much.
No, I think it was really, really interesting. And the last thing I think that really kind of was a window for me, because while I have listened to episodes of Call Her Daddy, and while I hear her talk about her husband and their relationship and the evolution of it, I actually had never looked him up, or I don't really follow her online, if that makes sense. I follow Call Her Daddy, but not her.
Yeah, same.
And so I didn't even know what he looked like. Like I had never seen her husband until this docuseries. And some of the interesting commentary I've seen online is that he was like controlling her and telling her what to do. And I did not get that.
Interesting.
I did not get
I didn't
that,
get that vibe.
at all. What I got was what I mentioned earlier, is someone who she seems humble and like she seems like a really hard worker. I got the vibe that she wants to do what's necessary in order to put out a good product, to be the best. Like, she gives off very collegiate athlete vibes. Wants to
for
be
sure.
the best, right?
I love that she still edits her show too.
Yeah,
Just for what it's worth. I think that's amazing.
I mean, I love that it's her and her best friend.
Yeah, that's
talking
incredible.
about what will be the most interesting questions to ask somebody of the caliber of the vice president. I love how nervous she got to interview the vice president.
Absolutely.
But back to her husband, I actually didn't see anything in their dynamic on screen. We don't know anything else. But all I saw was somebody who, and I can relate. I am pretty okay with like standing up for other people. I really struggle standing up for myself. Again, go back to the Hulu documentary. You'll understand. I can go to bat for you. I have a struggle going to bat for me, and I think I got that same vibe from her. She will stand up for her friends or her family, but she doesn't want to be seen as somebody who's combative or aggressive or a bitch in business. And so it's kind of hard when you're the main person to do those things without worrying that you're going to be perceived as an Ellen or whoever, right? So what I gathered was that her husband was really her rock and had the ability to communicate for her in a way that was still respectful to everyone around them, and that people took it like, okay, that's what we need to do.
He's also her business partner. Like, I don't think people understand that like he is her business partner. The way in which he operates from through the lens of like being protective of her, maybe is the phrase I'm looking for. That is like, they're in business together. That's a part of like having a business partner who does those things for you, who goes to bat for you. So, I mean, I didn't get any kind of vibe from him that was like controlling or weird. Like, I honestly think that he knows what he has and knows he has it really good. That was sort of the vibe I got. But I mean, I could be totally wrong.
I felt like he was really encouraging of her. And
absolutely.
Was very much a hype man. He was like, no, we got this. You're going to do this. It's going to be great. Like, super, super into it. And I mean, I think that's like the relationship dynamic that I have with Kevin. I am always the one that, let's just say something's wrong at dinner, right? I am the one that's like, oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. If we wouldn't mind, yada, yada. And it's not until it's like round two or three that I'm like, Kevin, can you do it? and then he
can you ask him for the thing?
Well, but then he's not asking anymore. He's demanding in the way that only he can. So I could imagine that that's a dynamic that both suits her personally and also professionally. Because you know, sometimes when you're a woman in business, the perceptions of you can be far from the truth of who you are when you're trying to get things accomplished.
Yeah. I also am like so curious about his thoughts of like her just talking about sex. Like, cause it's, I don't know. It's so interesting. Like, she's still on the tour. She's still like opened up a couple of her shows talking about like the Gluck Gluck 9000. It's sort of like,
what were they saying in the docuseries that she had like no voice. She was sick. And they were like, I guess I got to open the show talking about how like,
oh yeah, I was giving Matt too much, and he was like, "What are you talking about?"
No, he said something like, "Why would you lie? That's not what happened."
It's like, I do feel like it probably takes a very specific type of man to like, hear and see a very secure man to like hear and see your wife on stage talking about like previous sexual partners and escapades and all of that in a time where you were not present in her life. And, now she's made a multi-million-dollar business out of that. That's pretty...
I can imagine it's hard, but it's a lot easier when you got a $170 million deal.
Hundo P.
Like,
Hundo P.
Go talk about it.
Honestly, Ty literally is like, I don't care, sell feet pics. Like, whatever. Like, just as long as, like, girl, roll in some money.
For what it's worth, I do have a wiki feed, so it does make me wonder if it would translate. I think I have 3.5 out of 5 stars.
A wiki feed?
Yeah, and you want to know? It's because, now everyone's going to go look. It's because I have like long, skinny, super skinny toes. And
what is a wiki feed?
A wiki feed is a Wikipedia for people who are in the public eye's feet.
Shut the fuck up.
If you Google my name and wiki feet, you will see photos of my feet from red carpets.
Oh, there she is.
My long, skinny toes.
I'm screaming. Actually, Mallory, just so you know, you have a 4.08 stars on Wikifeed.
Oh, See, so point is, should I translate that to selling feet pictures?
100%. Absolutely.
Well,
you need to retire Kevin today.
listen, here's what needs to happen. The both of us need to go to our husbands and be like, listen, Alex Cooper did it. She went in 6 years from making nothing to 170 mil. What do you think about Maggie and I transitioning to maybe a joint?
A joint feet pic account. Yeah, I love it. Honestly, I have really long skinny toes too. So, and I have like weird dancer feet. So
Same.
I have like bunions. So yeah, T.
My best
Anyway.
friend when we were like 12, she named my middle toe Larry. So
Well,
Larry the long toe.
Larry's got 4 stars on Wiki Feet. So listen.